sometimes that call involves you getting down on a knee and helping explain to a child, like, hey, this is why you need to go to school. Like, this is why you need to respect your parents. Because believe it or not, people rely on law enforcement for parenting help. And then like the next call might require a high level of violence to resolve that situation, and then turn it off the second that it's over. Because public, and rightfully so, like, I mean, well, he stopped, he was no longer a threat. Like, so you got to turn it off like immediately. And that's difficult to balance. And then also come home and treat your family with love and respect.
All right, before we get started, make a little plug here. Get your Men's Alliance waterproof Bible. This is a New Testament with Psalms and Proverbs, and it's called The Eyewitness Accounts of Jesus of Nazareth. So that's going to spark conversation when people see you reading this. Waterproof, and it floats, very rugged. Check that out. Also, you can go to either our website or Amazon and pick up a copy of Answer with Truth. This will help men lead their families spiritually by providing you answers to the world's toughest questions. All right. So with that, we're going to dive right into today. We've got a war story, and we got Josiah Robertson here, call sign Breacher.
Hey there.
What's up, Breacher? Welcome.
Hey there.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Pretty cool to be here.
And Shadow's back.
I'm here.
Hey, Shadow.
Just lurching in the corners in the shadows.
And I'm drinking Tribe coffee this morning. I don't know what you guys are drinking.
Yeah, it's Tribe coffee.
What do you got? You got Folgers?
Yeah, it's
He's got
my Tribe coffee's on the
Starbucks.
counter. I've only got enough for one more cup, so
All right.
I'm saving.
We'll fix that.
Yeah, we'll get you a
Show
bag.
me that. Give me that bag right there. This is our Tribe coffee. So if you're not drinking it, you're wrong. So we'll get you one of these
Man.
for coming on. This will be your gift.
Man, you're
but
the
I got a
bomb.
fresh bag for you. So
Sweet. Thank you.
it's in the fridge.
That's an operational bag right there.
Yeah, that one's just for looks.
Nice.
So
Appreciate it, guys.
I actually, Breacher's one of the few guys that I knew from outside of Men's Alliance before he came to Men's Alliance. And we were just talking here before we started recording about the deer blood that is currently on your Bible case. Yeah, that's awesome. And so I met Breacher deer hunting several years ago. We've been deer hunting in the same group through the No Greater Love Foundation. So that was a cool connection to get you into Men's Alliance. And so tell us a little bit about. Let's start with how did you come to Journey Church and Men's Alliance?
Well, that's kind of just how far back you want to go with that, because so Men's Alliance
all the way back.
all the way back. All right, so it was dark. I'm sure somebody's made that joke before, but I was raised in a Christian household. Two great parents, still live around the area. They discipled me. We went to a local church here in the Chesterfield area. The church, now I've learned to respect some of the traditional things they upheld in a world where like traditional Christian values is constantly attacked. So, but at the time I didn't respect it at all. I hated it. And I was like, man, I feel like they're just trying to keep me down. They hate that, I want to do my own thing and like I want to smoke cigarettes or do these things. And they're just like, I just feel judged. And I don't think that was their heart at all, but that's the way I felt. So, really, as I said, I grew up in the church. As I got a little bit older in my teenage years, I got baptized as a young teenager. I believe it was genuine. Had a heart for Christ, wanted to follow Christ, but then also wanted to do non-Christian things. And a lot of the other folks at this church my age were kind of like along that same spectrum. So kind of walked away and just did my own thing. And as I progressed, I was homeschooled. You can insert whatever homeschool jokes you want. I've heard them all. So if you can find a new one.
Homeschool too.
Oh, man, look at that. Nerds.
Yeah.
Socially awkward for sure.
Well, nowadays it's totally flipped. Though.
Yeah, but
Nowadays the
I
homeschool
know.
ones are the normal ones, and everyone at public school identifies as a cat.
Yep. We have trend centers. Right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. But I was homeschooled back when it was
Weird.
not normal.
Yeah.
So, man, I'm so thankful now as a parent for that. But another thing that in the moment I was like, this is so stupid. I want to learn how to interact with people. And, that was something where I grew up, all my friends were Christian. Pretty much all of them went to the same church until I started doing some co-ops and getting out there. Co-op, if you don't know anything about homeschooling, is kind of like where you, there might be some parents who have a degree in teaching and they can help out with some more advanced stuff that your parent might not be able to do. So they would send you almost like a private school, just a couple days a week sometimes. So, sorry. So that like was challenging for me. I really wanted friends that would probably be not as good influence on me. I felt like I wanted to do things that were inappropriate. I started dating. I wanted to have sex. And that was like, obviously, I knew that was sinful. I knew that down in my heart. But I was like, man, how can I justify this? And that was the first thing. So my parents did let me go to public school for my junior and senior year. And went, and I really appreciate the freedom. It definitely taught me some lessons on how to interact with people who I don't agree with, because that was challenging. But started to kind of do my own thing there, and got a girlfriend, started having sex, and that was a kind of just the beginning of it. I was 18 years old at the time, or getting close to 18. I wanted to go into the Marine Corps, and man, I love the Marine Corps. I love what it did for my character, but it also has a lot of horrible influence on you. I'm sure Shadow knows that kind of thing. So when I went into the Marine Corps, it was like, if you don't have a biblical worldview, man, they're gonna tear you up and spit you out, because you're like immediately thrust in this environment of like, oh, how am I supposed to be cool? Well, drinking, smoking, dipping. I can, if I want to find porn. I want to find every single way to get a cuss word, like at least one per sentence. That would be the minimum standard. And like just the environment's not very healthy. Obviously, I'm not dogging on the Marine Corps. We need Marines. They're the best, for sure. No offense. But we are the best.
We are.
But you have to have a strong worldview. And as an 18-year-old, that can be challenging. So that kind of broke me down. I kind of was like, I struggled with it, though, because I knew what the truth was, and I just had a hard time with that. And when I got to... So I'm a reservist. I'll just put it out there. Anybody active duty, I don't want to take the wind out of your sails. Like normally people are like, man, you were in the Marines? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh, what'd you do? And I was like, reserves. And they're like, oh, well, thanks for your service. I'm like yeah.
Only an active duty Marine would even know the difference, though, of what you're talking about. Like, to everybody else, you're a superhero, right? Nobody knows. I mean, you're a Marine. A Marine's a Marine. When you start to nuance it, only you guys know the difference.
I appreciate it. So,
what'd you do in the Marines?
Communications. I started as an
Pogue life.
Yeah, dude, 100%. Yeah, oh yeah. I started as an air traffic controller and like was pretty stupid, so that didn't work out. That was like intellectually challenging.
Yeah.
So I was at 29 Palms doing that, and they're like, well, if you want to stay here, we got communications. So field wireman is what I ended up as. And that was way more up my alley and helped with like some civilian world stuff, career stuff. So
yeah, that's probably the smarter route. If you just go in the infantry, I mean, yeah, you got bragging rights, but it pretty much ends there. You can be a cop.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Well, we'll get to that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, I love it, and I so wish that I could take, like, my maturity and worldview now and apply it back when I was there. I mean, you could do so much in that environment. There are so many people who are open to hearing the gospel, because it's like a lot of Marines, not everyone, a lot of Marines would, like, identify themselves as Christian. That's probably true in the military in general.
Yeah.
I mean, you have that mindset, even if you're a pogue. If you don't know what a pogue is, personnel other than grunt. So in at least the Marine world, I'm sure it's similar with the Army. Like, you're either a grunt or you're not. If you're not a grunt, you're a pogue. It's kind of just...
you're a pogue posing as a grunt to everybody else.
Yeah.
Just like he said, if you say you're a Marine, everybody just instantly thinks, oh, you bust down doors.
You must
You're
have killed
Marine.
somebody.
Yeah. And we want to point out, no, he didn't. He would just...
But I bet even amongst the grunts, there's like these grunts and then these grunts.
Well, sure, we have
Right.
intramural
So it's like
rivalries
you're
for
never
sure.
going to really arrive.
of
There's
course.
always
Oh,
another
yeah,
level
yeah.
that you haven't made it to.
Yeah, if you're a grunt, it's like, well, you're not SF, you know,
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
not a sniper or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always something
There's
that
always
you're not.
something. Yeah.
You're never there.
I was everything. So
I'm not allowed to talk about what I've
yeah,
done.
I can't talk about it.
Yeah. That's the
I
easiest
had
way.
a like pro scholarship to go like play football for
Right.
college.
Right.
And I could either go to jail or the military. So
Yeah, those are all the good
yeah,
stories.
Yeah.
It's like, when were you growing up? Was it 1965?
Yep.
Man.
It's a lot harder to get in the military than people realize.
Yeah.
If your knowledge of the military is from movies,
Yeah.
you're going to be really shocked when you walk into a recruiter now and they don't accept you,
Yeah.
Right.
and you've got to take tests.
Right.
And so you're like, holy cow, there's a lot of people trying to get in. They can actually be selective.
Yeah.
Especially the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Because they don't care how small they are.
Yeah. Exactly.
They don't have like the quotas
Yeah.
that the other branches
They're already
have.
the smallest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a great life experience. Those guys are obviously open to the gospel, and I had some of that, and I like practiced some of it. I go through like a spell in 29 Palms is where I was at, if I didn't say that already, and that was like the desert. So like once again, looking back on it, man, it's not that bad. Like it's actually pretty cool. There are dudes living out in the field all the time. You're living in barracks. You've got access to everything and limited liberty. You can go do, that you could buy a car for 30% interest rate. It's like handed to you. So it's great, but I just wish that I could have respected that in the moment, but I didn't. And like, so I would go through times where I'd fall back on like, let me pray. Let me like, I want to listen. Podcasts weren't as big back then, but I'm going to listen to like my church's sermon or, let me call somebody and talk to them. Cause you go through your spells in the military when you're away from your family for your first significant time of your life. But that was the big thing there. I left like me trying to maintain my faith kind of went away when I got home. Cause I was like, all right, now I get to tell everybody every second that I'm a Marine, and and like that was my goal. And okay, now I've got my Marine friends who were like from my recruiting station. They're great guys. I was good friends with them at the time, but like consisted of every week they would come home from Lejeune, and because they were active duty grunts. So I'm not gonna say I'm not a grunt because I hung out with them, but I'm basically a grunt.
Right. A grunt by association.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I hear you.
But it was like, man, every weekend we're drinking. Every weekend we're doing stupid stuff. I don't have any money because though I have a job, like I spend my money on stupid stuff with no discipline. And like, I'm not going to church. Like I'm sleeping in or doing something Sunday. And I still know, but it's challenging to me. About that time, I met my now wife, Emily Robertson. Cinema is her call sign. She's in Women's Alliance. So, and the reason I was drawn to her is because she comes from a Catholic background, and like in my heart, I knew I dated a couple girls throughout that time, and like in my heart, I knew like I want to get married. Like even when I'm dating some of these girls that are just not marriage material at all, I still know like, man, my goal here is to get married. I want to get married and have a family. And I knew like, man, I needed to find somebody who was a Christian with that. So Emily, I just happened to know her and ran into her at the mall. I was working. I wasn't hanging out at the mall, just to be clear.
Did your mom drop you off?
Yeah. Yeah. So ran into her, and that was like awesome. So shot her a message on Instagram, slid in the DMs there, like before I could even walk away. And like, so that was the beginning of that. But I wasn't living for God at all. Like I wanted to pursue fleshly desires nonstop. And so now we're probably about 21 years old is where I'm at. I really wanted to become a police officer. That was like, honestly, I went into the Marines to try to get something on my application for police because I knew I wasn't going to go to college. It wasn't happening.
It was a stepping stone.
Exactly. Yeah. So I like that's all I wanted to do in life. And I don't know why that was like a thing I wanted to do, but I worked at a couple of different places while trying to get there. But so pre-2020, law enforcement was actually extremely difficult to get into.
Right.
So you would go and you would apply somewhere, and depending, on the agency, there could be thousands of applications for 10, 20 spots. It just depends. And that's like was the norm in law enforcement. So Obviously, I grew up in Chesterfield. I worked in Hanover at Dish Network at the time. So, like, my exposure to law enforcement to this point, I didn't know anything about it other than maybe some episodes of Cops. And, like, was like, okay. I ran into them a couple times while I was working for Dish, and they were always just the nicest people. I had great interactions with them. In Chesterfield, they're a great department. I'm not dogging them at all. Fantastic. They're arguably one of the best in the nation now. But I just didn't have as great of interactions with them, and like my impression growing up was a little bit different. So I was like, I don't know where to apply. So I go through the process. It's an extensive process to get hired, and I get just shot down at the very end. And I was like, man, it was rough. And I was like, all right, well, I don't even know. Like at this time in my life, I don't even know where Petersburg, Virginia is, or what it is. And I somehow ended up applying to them. I don't know how I did that, but put in for Petersburg. And sure enough, they're short. There's not thousands of candidates. If you're not from this area, Petersburg is like a 30 square mile area of pretty much low income, high crime environment. They've got a couple higher end areas, but it's a pretty rough area. And, you know, the government in the city has some corruption issues, or has in the past. I haven't kept up with it as much recently. And so like they got me in and they hired me, and that was pretty awesome. So still not following God at this point in my life. Me and my soon-to-be wife are getting more serious. She's going through nursing school because obviously police officers and nurses have to get married. So she's going through nursing school, and we're just dating and kind of living for ourselves and fleshly desires again, like sleeping together. And I would get to these low points where I'm like falling back on my foundation here. Part of Foundation Tribe, so shout out to Foundation Tribe. Nice. Falling on my foundation where I'm like, dude, I'm like struggling right now, and I know I need to follow God, but I just don't want to give up the sin in my life. Right. I want to keep doing the fun stuff, and that was extremely challenging for me to get out of that. So Petersburg, like I said, rough environment, coming from Chesterfield, which probably pretty normal suburban area to most people, and growing up here in the homeschool environment, pretty sheltered with some exposure in high school and then the Marine Corps, obviously. But I never got deployed, so it wasn't like I was dealing with blood and loss and issues overseas. I go to Petersburg, and that is definitely like a smack in the face. Like I remember I'm on field training, and it was actually, I'm doing my pre-hire or like initial hire ride along. Like I maybe just got the job and was doing a ride along, and we respond to a hit and run, and we get there, and the dude is on the side of the road, and I'm like standing around, I didn't really know what to do, and they're like, man, he's gone, and I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, man, this is the first time I've ever been around somebody who's died, like in my entire life. Like some people that's normal, but I was like, man, that guy's dead. And I was like, that's just kind of wild when you're 21 years old and you're like, dude, this is the first time I've ever seen this. And then go through the academy, and my first call for service out of the academy is a death investigation. Nothing strange, but if you don't know that, people die. And when they die, like the police normally come. If it's not like a nursing home or a hospital or something, the police are going to come to your home and do an investigation. And you normally it's pretty routine, like where there's medical issues, health issues, but once again, you're 21 years old and you're like, dude, I have no clue what I'm doing here. There's a dead person here. There's family that's upset. You got to sympathize and handle that situation. So I did not know that like any worldview I had was about to really get shook in this environment. Petersburg, a lot of great people work there. It gets dogged on a lot in the police world, but it's a rough place to work, and you get like a lot of exposure to violence and high stress situations. And you don't if you don't have a worldview, you're just going to fall apart. And a lot of the folks there did not share Christian values at all. And obviously I was not following God at all. So like you're just thrown into an environment, alcohol, the sex, the just poor influences on your life, and also while dealing with high stress environments. And so this is kind of when law enforcement's taking a shift. So like things changed, obviously in 2020 with George Floyd. And now I'm going to forget the previous gentleman's name that kind of started that a couple of years before, maybe 2018. But law enforcement started to change. Like it's not a, we're getting body cams. You can't talk to people. You should be respectful regardless. But, officers can't just sit here and, cuss out somebody like it might have happened in the past. And so that's challenging if you don't have that like foundation there to treat people with respect and how to interact with people. So like in high stress environments, what you want to say comes out and it's not always appropriate.
Treating people with respect when they're not treating you with respect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, but now with, so you can't respond naturally to someone. You have to respond as you should, really, but you have to be on your P's and Q's constantly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. It was, so like, all right, you're in a foot pursuit or somebody just drew a gun on you or, somebody's reaching and not complying. Like that's stressful stuff. Believe it or not, like you want to go home at the end of the day. And, right. I imagine a lot of people listening to this podcast probably understand the concept, but, to the people who don't, like, I mean, I've got a family and I want to go home. And it's not that I want to, do anything to this person, but like I don't know them from Adam and they're doing something that they might mean like they're going for their wallet or something and they're just doing it fast. And it's, so it stresses police officers out and creates, especially in an environment where like a place like Petersburg, where like, violence is high, and, a lot of your calls for service involve drugs, involve firearms. And it's just, it's difficult to balance that. Like, hey, let me be really kind to people, be respectful, be professional, but also like maintain that, violence might be needed in this situation to resolve. Right. It's tough. So that I loved the police work in Petersburg. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I was young in my career. I was a rookie for sure, and like I wanted to get out after it every day. Like I wanted to be chasing people. I wanted to make arrests. I wanted to take bad guys off the street. And I did that as much as I could. And it's a enriching environment down there for that. There's lots of great people down there too. Like, don't misconstrue what I'm saying. That there's plenty of awesome people who are doing everything they can. But it is a challenging environment also. So, after a couple of years there, a lot of people in Petersburg you either stay and you're there for the rest of your career, or you jump off and go to another department. And I was having some issues with a supervisor there, and a lot of it was a me problem. Believe it or not, as a Marine type guy, I can have troubles with leadership in my life. So I sometimes wish that I had worked through that a little bit better, but I didn't at the time. And God obviously has used it with my new position. But got hired at another agency, a much more family-friendly, traditional values, a lot of Christians there, genuine Christians, and still not a Christian though. And now at this point in my life, me and my wife at the time girlfriend are we want to get married. I think we get engaged. We get engaged while I'm still working for Petersburg. Then we leave, and this is where it kind of hit me. I'm like, man, I'm getting ready to get married. I'm like, I know the foundation that I have in my life, but I need to take this seriously. And I was still all right, the big catch here is that I didn't want to stop having sex outside of marriage. Mm-hmm. That was the big one I didn't want to let go of. And that was, I know I'll be accountable for this in some level. I don't completely understand the complexities of that, but I was well, if I can just get married, then it's no longer a sin. And obviously that's not the right answer. You need to repent of your sin in the moment. And if that means you're getting married tomorrow and that means 24 hours you need to go, all right. But if that means it's years, then you need to do that also.
Yeah, it's easy to justify. Like, I'm going to marry this girl, so it's okay.
Exactly.
The marriage is just paperwork. You know, it's like,
dude, you're like taking the words. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So, but I knew, I was like, man, if I'm going to lead my family, and like, I don't understand all of that, and I don't understand some of the need for men to step up and lead. But I'm like, I know, like, that's what my dad did. That's what my dad showed me, was servant leadership and, leading the family awesome. But like, I need to do that. And marriage is serious. I know that. And like, I'm entering into this. So like, I need to step up. So I think some of this I told to Emily, and she was like, well, you should go to Journey. Journey's here in Chesterfield. Actually, if you're coming, I don't know when this podcast is going to come out, but if you're coming to the birthday dinner, you'll be at Journey. So I was like, all right, I'll check out Journey. So went to Journey, and it's a larger church. So the church I went to growing up is definitely not that big. And Journey's way more contemporary, and like mega church, no. But for like the Richmond area, it's definitely a large church. And started going there, kind of got thrown into a community group position there pretty quick. And at the time, Journey was going through some transitions on like combating, maybe, I'll make sure I choose my words in a uplifting, wise way. I think the pastor there was making intentional decisions to lead the church into a disciple-making model, and kind of away from maybe a cultural Christian model. Become more intentional with his preaching and scripture, and that's a big task for a church that size. So, God really blessed me in throwing me into that a little bit, with just leading a community group. And like at the time, I was like, you guys don't even know me. Like my wife at the time was not a Christian, and I'm like, you don't even know where my faith's at. You haven't asked me any questions, and you're throwing me into this. And they're like, well, we're going to equip you. And so came into it and started this community group. And I was like, all right, well, I'll just do what I can with this. I wanted to be fed, and like I found that through a John MacArthur daily podcast, like a 30-minute daily podcast that comes out called Grace to You. And I was like, all right, cool. So this will help me progress in my faith. And I'm now married and like want to take charge and lead a Christian life. But even though I've been a Christian most of my life, I feel like I'm a baby in my knowledge of Christianity. Like I've never heard of the word apologetics. I've never heard of any of that. And like maybe for the first couple of years of me going back into this walk was like, okay, I'll listen to a chapter a day, but I'm only doing the audio Bible because I can't read because I'm a Marine. So,
see, not the only one.
Oh, I know. You don't have to convince me that Marines don't read.
Yeah. So that was like, all right, cool. So I started doing that, and I'm leading this community group, and that's like okay. Disclaimer: it was a living room community group. So there was no workout. There was no fire, and
there was coffee cake.
There was no coffee cake because this was young adults, and they didn't want that. Like they didn't want any snacks, so maybe there was coffee. And that was it. But it was awesome because I got to learn some of like the ins and outs of leadership in the church there. Like how am I going to sit here if I don't know what I'm talking about? I'm like, I need to start learning these things. The pastor at Journey was walking the staff through a book called Another Gospel by Elisa Childers. And one of the guys in my group was on staff, and he was like, told me about this book. And I was like, man, actually, it's call sign Milkman. Shout out to him, Harrison Alexander. He's the one, he recommended this book. I was like, okay, awesome. Check it out. And I had, once again, never heard of apologetics. If you're new to apologetics, I'd recommend this book as like kind of a launching point. It's easy to read. And that kind of like helped me dive in. And I didn't even know what progressive Christianity was. And like, I was like, man, I didn't realize that this was all out here. I kind of just assumed you're Christian or you're not. Like, it's that simple. And I didn't realize that there was like this attack on the church, specifically the American church. But, it's just like this transgender ideology, the homosexuality ideology, like women as leadership over men in churches, those kind of things that were like attacking the principles of the church.
Yeah. And by the way, progressive Christianity, talk about it in Answer with Truth. So it's not going to be as in-depth, certainly. It's just a couple pages in here dedicated to it. But people definitely need to know what that is and be aware of it. It's springing up in churches. Yeah. Alyssa Childers is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, because we want to be equipped to fight the enemy, and to do that takes training. Like, it's not something that just comes to you. The Holy Spirit can use you how he wants to use you, for sure. And maybe that is like literally putting words in you that you don't know you have. But I firmly believe that he's going to use you more if you're trained and equipped with that stuff to actually go into battle. So that was the launching point. And, that's where I was like, man, I didn't realize this enemy was here. Then I kind of started to see that around me in the church. Was like, man, there are people here. Like, I'm uncomfortable making some of these statements. Like, is homosexuality a sin? Like, I'm getting pushback on something that I thought was like pretty plain, and it's not. Well, it is in Scripture, but it's not like in some of these environments. Mm-hmm. I also didn't understand, and not because my parents didn't teach me. Like, they taught me. It was just in one ear out the other sometimes. Was like, I didn't understand the Bible's inerrant, like, and an authority. Like, I just assumed the Bible. Yeah, it's the Bible. Like, Christians read it. Like, I'm pretty sure it's from God or something. It's like about where my knowledge of that went. So while this is going on, my wife is not a Christian at the time. And like, that was starting to become a challenge as I started to take my faith more seriously. And she was a pushing point for a lot of this, but she was not coming to church with me at the time. She worked for a while weekend program as a nurse. So that was obviously a pretty valid reason to miss it. And then, there'd be times where it's like, well, no, I'm not going to go. And it was like, okay, well, all right. But she would ask really good questions. Like, a lot of them you address a lot in your book, Answer with Truth, like Old Testament questions. Like, well, what about this? What about the marrying of family members, or, the rape, or, it seems like it's condoned and things like that. And I didn't have answers for it. So I was like, man, well, I want to know, like, what I want to be educated. If I'm going to do something, I want to do it well. And so I was like, okay, so continue studying these things. And like, it came to a head. So just a couple of years ago, we got pregnant. My wife got pregnant, and like, at the time, I'm like maybe 27 or something like that, and maybe 28, and like, I'm super excited about this. Like, I want to have a kid for sure. And she has a miscarriage at like, early on in the pregnancy, but like, it was extremely challenging to work through. So at the time, I didn't realize, like, miscarriages are common, but that doesn't take away from the impact of a miscarriage. Mm-hmm. And I didn't handle it in a way that I'm proud of. I tried to be sympathetic, to it, and, hey, I'm sorry that happened. But it didn't like hurt me as much as it really should have. Because I don't think I understood some of the fundamentals of life that I would now say I think I understand better. And some of that's, Next has a pretty awesome testimony. You guys have had him on before, and that's been helpful. Some other podcasts have been helpful, but I wish I could go back and change that and just be like, hey, we lost a child. Like, you didn't lose an embryo. Like, we lost a child. We are both parents now, and we just never got to meet our child. And I didn't walk through that. I still tried to like be supportive, but I just wish I could have like really come alongside her better with that. That turned, her into pretty angry at God about that. Like, for a while it was like, I don't understand why God would allow this to happen. Why would he allow me to get pregnant and get us all excited just to take it away? And then like, she's like, and there's blood, and it's just like, I'm looking at the blood of my child here, and how could God do that? Like, that doesn't, no God would do that. That doesn't make any sense. So it kind of transitioned from like anger to God to bold-faced atheism. This became really challenging for me to work through, because like it would go from like, hey, I have sympathy, I want to try to help disciple you and bring you to Christ, and then it'd be like anger. It's like, no, stop attacking my faith. Like, you're angry at God and it's coming out on me. And that was really tough. So it's a long game. Like for anybody who doesn't have a spouse or who has a spouse who, or any loved one who's not a Christian, that's not something that gets solved overnight. I mean, it could, but this is something that it takes investment and time. And I wish I could have handled it better, going back with more love. John MacArthur has a fantastic book called Safe in the Arms of God, that talks about child loss and miscarriages. And that was like extremely helpful for me. I read that, man, and it was just like, every time I pick it up, I'm crying about something, because it's like, daggum, like I should have taken this more seriously, and I didn't. And now I've like lost that opportunity to come alongside her in that way and show the love of Christ because I didn't handle it that way. Ultimately, we went and planted a tree in the backyard, named our child Jude. And now I'm like, hey, when I get the opportunity, I'm like, hey, I'm a parent of 2 kids now. One I just never got to meet. That's my way of describing it. And I try to change my perspective on things like, hey, hopefully if it's in God's plan for us to get pregnant again, I'm not going to wait to tell people like, oh, let's get past the warning stages of pregnancy and then tell people. Like, no, we have this community around us for the loss if there's an issue, and to rejoice. That's good. It's like, so we have this cultural standard of like, hey, keep it quiet until like 12 weeks in case something happens to the baby. And then like, so you don't have to rescind any. So
you can suffer alone.
Exactly. Like, what's the point of that? Like,
yeah, right.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
Isolation's terminal. So
a lot of people don't realize how loaded the question, how many kids do you have, is.
Yeah.
We ask that so commonly. Oh, how many kids do you have? Man, that's a tough question for a lot of people to answer.
Mm-hmm.
It opens the door for you to share the gospel, though. I mean, because if you tell them 2, and then, and I'm like, but I've only got 1 here on earth. They're gonna, well, what do you mean by that? And
right. That is a great way to open that door.
Yeah. So
what if you don't got time to talk about it though?
Give my phone number or something.
It's like somebody just asks you don't feel like going into your whole story.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you're not going to do it all the time.
Yeah. I don't.
That's why I just don't talk to people. It's like, I don't need any new friends.
Yeah. So it was like really challenging to just maintain this love of like, hey, I want you to become a Christian. So God did bless us with my firstborn son, hopefully of many, but right now my only child, second child, just to be clear, second child, right. And Lachlan is his name. He's call sign Pint because he tried to grab a beer at Fest once. So
that's funny.
Yeah, he's awesome. Love him so much. And like,
how old?
Coming up on 2 years
Almost
old now.
2.
Yeah. So hopefully be a war fighter one day.
So are you 30?
31.
Okay.
Yeah. So Emily at the time, still not a Christian. She started to have some heart changes. Obviously, when you have a child, you bring a child into this earth. Like, really started to change her perspective on things. She like realizing that like, man, look at this. Like, this is a baby. I mean, how does this just come together? It doesn't. Like, you take a whole bunch of metal and throw it, you don't get a car. Like,
it's a miracle.
Yeah.
Every single life, every birth.
And one of the things that I learned going through that process as the supportive couch sitting husband in the hospital was like, dude, we try to like dumb down everything nowadays. Like surgery, you're unconscious, you don't get to see it. Like death is quickly a blanket's over it, we clean it up. But like, that you can't really like take away from the miracle of pregnancy and birth. Like, it's pretty raw the entire time.
I heard a guy once say, man, he had just had a kid. He was like, man, everybody says this is a miracle. It wasn't a miracle, man. It was disgusting. It was so messy. And I'm like, that doesn't mean it's not a miracle. It's a messy miracle. It's both, right? It's absolutely a miracle. And like you said, it's very raw.
Yeah.
And it's not sterilized.
Exactly. Like we can only, I mean, you get the comfort of the bed and the epidural and, everything that you want in the hospital, but it still is pretty like, hey, it's right here in front of you. Like you're seeing it. So that's pretty cool. So once you have a child, like I'm sure everybody who's had a kid has gone through something like this. Like if you're a man, you start to get defensive, like more so than you might have been before. Like, and it went from like me I had an older perspective of like, hey, religiously from a Christian perspective, I disagree with homosexuality. But from a political perspective, I'm like, hey, You know, I think that they should have the right to do what they want. I get it. Like, and I think that even now you could say that amongst Christians and they'd probably be like, yeah, seems fair enough. Like, yeah, okay. But when I had a kid and I had immediately started seeing the cultural attacks on children, like, I was like, yeah, that ends now. Like, this is an attack. And that doesn't mean that everybody who struggles with that or who participates in that is trying to attack your family, you know, but as a whole, the system is. And that was something where I was like, man, all right, I need to step it up. Like, I'm responsible now to God. I have to answer for this. I have to answer for the discipleship of my wife and my child. And now it's going to come, like, I need to start taking this really seriously. And, you know, Journey had really poured into me, sending me to some training, giving me opportunities to lead things. I'm so grateful for that. And, like, that was really, it put me into a community there. At the same time, I think that's probably about the same time I met you. I had known you for a couple of years, but you were an Air Force guy, so I kind of just put you in your corner of Air Force stuff. No, we would go hunting and, like, you know, we go on this trip like once a year if we can.
Yeah.
And when I first went, I think was the first time I met you, it was like, everybody was new to me. So
yeah. I didn't know. It's a big house with a ton of people staying in it.
Yeah.
And, you know, everybody's probably either a veteran or a cop.
Yeah.
Everybody's law enforcement or military, and all different branches, and everybody's kind of at it with each other.
Yeah, the entire time.
You know, it's kind of just good natured joking the entire time, and cop stories.
Yeah,
a lot of good cop stories.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, I didn't, you know,
Don't know nothing about that. Maybe I'll get to go one day. I don't know.
Maybe we'll let you. I don't know. You have to prove yourself to me.
We got some deer blood on you.
Yeah. Screw you guys.
So
Go to a hunt club.
look, I don't know what to tell you, man. It's a pretty great time.
Yeah, it is.
I don't want to brag about
I'm
it.
sure
One of the
it
best
is.
weeks out of the year.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Sure it
Eat
is.
the
Good
best
for you guys.
food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're out in
Yeah.
the mountains during fall,
Oh man.
killing big bucks, exaggerating stories.
Yeah.
Those poor deer.
Yeah.
See, that's why right there. That's why
you're not coming, Shadow. Yeah. So, you know, so we're recording this in 2024, the end of 2024. This would have been, I think we did bow that year. So maybe it was late October it was late October. I think the first day we were out there was bow, and then we switched to muzzleloader. So 2023. And that's like, I don't know if I had started following you on Facebook or Instagram or something, but somehow, like, I had started listening to the podcast and was like, it must have been the previous year that you had, like, mentioned it. And if anybody doesn't know, Goose is pretty humble about it. He doesn't, like, walk around touting Men's Alliance. He's kind of like, oh, what do you do for a living? He's like, well, I retired out of the Air Force, or you might have still been in at the time. And you're like, I do a men's ministry. And I think that's what I remember you describing it as. And so, cool. Well, good stuff, man. Nice talk. And then we talked about other stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, later on, I don't know how I stumbled across the Men's Alliance podcast and started listening. That's when you guys were starting to advertise Start the Fire, which you guys should be careful about doing this stuff during hunting season. You eat up a lot of weekends.
I know.
fall.
We're gonna fix this better next year.
Yeah, like it's
I
tough.
sabotaged my own muzzleloader season.
You didn't make it out this year.
It's a good point.
Yeah. So, you know, I was like, all right, I had listened to this
It's
podcast.
just to challenge your priorities. That's why.
Yeah,
we do
exactly.
that. Yeah.
I wasn't going to a tribe at all because Emily really wanted me to be around the family. I worked at the time. I was in investigations, and, you know, just depending what was going on, come out of a pretty big case that took up a lot more time than usual for an extended period of time. And then, so that was kind of like weighing on her a little bit. Like, you're never around. And I was like, well, anything I did Bible study wise, I tried to do in the morning when she would be asleep, and then avoid taking up time with her. So I was like, wow, I can't make it to any tribes right now. It's just not happening. And Journey maybe had just launched a tribe, but it wasn't really talked about. And I was like, well, I don't know about Chapel. I don't know them. Like, I'm not sure if I'm going to go to another church's tribe. And so, like, I want to deviate just a little bit and roll back to the law enforcement thing, so as my faith was young, like, that's when I started to realize, like, I need to lean into this. with anybody in those environments, like the possibility of post-traumatic stress disorder is pretty significant. You see extremely traumatic stuff on a pretty regular basis. Like I left Petersburg where there was homicides all the time. And I mean, at least shootings and to homicides. And then I go to where it's a much lower violence rate there. But vehicle accidents, well, believe it or not, vehicle accidents are usually messier than a shooting. And like, that was my first time seeing some of the most brutal stuff of my life, was like watching somebody die in front of me over a period of time of maybe 15 minutes, like just an agonizing death. And that's like, I mean, I remember like I didn't really struggle with a lot of the homicides, at least not in the front of my brain. I'm sure that it's doing damage to me on the back end, but it was like, okay, I mean, maybe they asked for it. It was like a no love thought process. Like I didn't have mercy for them, like, because I didn't, at the time I wasn't a Christian. I didn't care. I was like, they might have asked for this. They're involved in some sort of violence, and my heart was starting to change though. It was like, all right. I went to one accident where it was just a brutal accident, and I walked away from that, and like the entire time I was dealing with this person who ended up dying, and it was like I'm just trying to hold it together, because it was like, dude, you can only handle so much, and like this guy obviously is feeling what he's going through right now, and it was just really challenging for me. I walked away from that, got in my car, and just broke down. I was like, dude, I've never felt this way before, and like that was really challenging. And so you're dealing with these exposures to things. Sometimes you can call it a critical incident. Sometimes we reserve that for like an actual shooting that you're involved in or something. But as like a normal citizen might be exposed to death once or twice in their life, and sometimes family, just like a close family member passing away naturally. An unnatural death, the normal citizen's not really exposed to that. And then like law enforcement, like 1 second you're sitting here eating sushi with your friends, the next second like you're watching a dude die for 15 minutes because you just caught that call. So that's like, it was really challenging for me, and I was like, man, I need to start leaning in. I also still was, even when I was starting to go to church again, like it's a sanctification process, so I'm like growing. I got in trouble for the way I talked to somebody once, and I owned it 100%. I was like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. But like, really, it was like, man, why was my heart that way when I talked to that person? Obviously, they were not speaking respectfully to me, but I'm responsible for my actions, not theirs. So I was like, okay, and I realized like I've got friends who are struggling with PTSD. Like I'm still in contact with some of my Marine friends. They're really struggling with it, alcohol addiction, and especially when I was on midnights, it's easy to get off of midnights and like come home, you get some food, drink some beers, and go to sleep every day when you're working. And it's like, okay, I need to be careful with that. And I'm starting to I need to start establishing what I'm going to rely on when I go through something like this. And that's where I really started, I think, leaning into scripture and strong Christian friends that were starting to form around me. And that was really helpful for me. I've been really blessed. I think a gift of God that it hasn't had quite an impact on me that I think some other people might struggle with. The term PTSD is almost worn as like a valor badge or something. Like I earned that, and now I'm struggling with it for the rest of my life.
Hey guys, I've got 2 huge announcements for you. So I'm about to give you some dates. You're going to want to forward this podcast directly to your wife and tell her to mark your calendar. All right. The first one is coming up January 10th. It's the Men's Alliance 8-year birthday dinner and fundraiser. Going to be here at Journey Church in Richmond, Virginia. Go to our website. There's a banner at the top for you to buy tickets. It's a great date night. Bring your wife. It's going to be an amazing dinner. Get the tickets now. We're going to be announcing our Tribesman of the Year and Tribe Leader of the Year. It's a lot of fun. It's an awesome event. Also, if you don't live in the area and you can't make it to the birthday dinner, no problem. Set up a watch party. Get some food. Get your tribe. Join us live streamed. We want to connect with all of our tribes virtually for our 8-year birthday dinner. All right, second big announcement. and this one's super big. We are having our first ever Men's Alliance National Rally, May 2nd through 4th, Pocahontas State Park here in Richmond, Virginia. We have incredible guest speakers coming. We've got Greg Kokel, Stephen Mansfield. You don't want to miss it. You can camp out or you can get a hotel in the area. We are encouraging everyone to camp, road trip here, grill out. It's going to be amazing. We're going to have a booth giving Men's Alliance tattoos. We are going to have cigars. We are going to have sledgehammer throwing. We're going to have the Barbarian Games, and we're going to have a national all tribes. Guys, this is an unconference. This is going to be unlike anything you've ever gone to because nothing like this has existed. We are putting on a Men's Alliance style weekend for Christian men. The workouts, the speakers, the fires, the food, it's going to be incredible. Don't miss it. Go get your tickets. men'salliancetribe.com.
But it's like, well, it proves that I've been through something.
Right.
Yeah.
I think cops, just the whole culture, I think, in America of, the average police officer sees way more traumatizing things than the average military personnel or veteran. And we give so much props as deserved and thank yous to veterans for their service, and we just assume they've seen bad things, and we can get a bad taste in our mouth of cops, and we just don't see them, I think, in the same light. A lot of people don't, and just like they should be getting this, I think, the same amount of, like, if they see something traumatic or PTSD, they don't get the same kind of VA disability benefits or anything, and they're probably way worse than the average. I was a sheriff's deputy for 9 years. I saw way more stuff in the sheriff's office than I did in the military. I saw stuff in the military, but on a regular basis, you have to, like you said, deal with giving somebody a death notification because you saw them hang themselves or whatever, and then the next call is going to help an old lady across the street. And you have to give them, like, they deserve you at the top of your game, polite, and you have to pretend you just didn't see any of that stuff. So just give the average, when you see a cop, just say thank you for what you do.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all you can do. And just realize, like, they see the worst of humanity every single day and then have to go home and pretend like they just didn't see what they saw.
Yeah.
And just go on living and pretend it didn't affect them. So
it's easy to, even amongst the Christian community, to be like, man, we don't want tyranny. We don't want the government controlling. And I agree to a pretty large extent that, got to be careful. But the average law enforcement officer doesn't want to do that. At least the guys I know, we want to protect your rights. We want to protect you. And you got to have that ability to flip a switch. Yep. Like you're saying, with going from one call to another. Sometimes that call involves you getting down on a knee and helping explain to a child, hey, this is why you need to go to school. This is why you need to respect your parents. Because believe it or not, people rely on law enforcement for parenting help. Mm-hmm. And then the next call might require a high level of violence to resolve that situation, and then turn it off the second that it's over. Yep. Because public, and rightfully so, he stopped, he was no longer a threat. So you got to turn it off immediately. And that's difficult to balance. And then also come home and treat your family with love and respect.
And know that every decision you make needs to be justified and you will be held accountable for it. Yeah. Legally, so every day you have the opportunity and potential of going to jail for a bad decision you made, or fired. Yeah. So it's just, it's like being on this podcast every day you go to work.
So what do you recommend to cops hearing you that completely identify with everything you're saying? And they're like, yeah, that's exactly me. That's what I'm struggling with. How do you recommend that they manage that balance?
Yeah.
First thing I'm going to say is hey, we need to stop relying on people who are equal with you in life experience or police experience. There's this attitude of hey, I'm up here on my experience and the things I've been through. I'm not talking to that dude down there about this because he doesn't know. And you're right, he might not know. That was the first pride pill I had to swallow when I decided to start coming to Men's Alliance. Was like, hey, not everybody around the fire here has ever held a gun or pointed it at somebody. Like, that's a reality. And it's like, hey, but these guys like love God, have life experience, and scripture like speaks to the situations you're going to be in. So like, that's the first thing, is like, put that pride aside about who you're going to. You know, your friend who was there with you on that call might be a great guy and then like you can rely on, but that doesn't mean that they're the best person to speak into your life about how to work through it.
Wow, that's really good.
I've struggled with like, you know, how do you do this stuff? And dude, I don't understand how somebody who's not a Christian can make it through a career like that, or really anything. I'm not taking away from the career of just working really hard either. Like, but I don't understand how you can go through that and not have like that trust in God of like, hey, this is part of a purpose. This is for a mission. And like, I've tried to adjust my handling. As I've grown in my faith, like I've found a genuine love for people who I'm arresting. Like, yeah, you're still going to get that Romans 13 authority in your life right now. But like, I still care about you. And like, hey, I want to speak the gospel into your life in this vulnerable moment where you're going through this. You're still going to jail, and I'm not going to like necessarily speak up to get you out of jail, but you're going to like, you're still human and God loves you. I want to show God's love through me for you. But to go back to your question, like, man, an environment like Men's Alliance, I've been like trying to scream that environment at my place of employment for forever. I mean, like, guys, like, this is so cool. It's such a great environment full of dudes who will come alongside you and help you through the worst times and bring you through that. That's what I would say is the best way to work through that. Like, if you don't have scripture, you're going to fall back on something.
Yeah.
And if that's alcohol, if that's anger, if that's just shutting down into your room and like locking your family out, that might be it. And family's great. You know, you say, you have the quote, your wife's not your best friend. My wife adamantly disagrees with you. I won't speak to my position on it right now. But like, you need other dudes in your life who are able to speak into this regardless.
Yeah, you need both. You need to be able to talk and say everything to your wife, and you need a guy that you're able to talk to as well, because you'll get two different perspectives of feedback. You know, wives, they're very nurturing.
Yeah.
Most of them, when you talk to them, and they're gonna give you a hug, but they're not quite as good at kicking you in the butt when that's what you need.
Yeah.
But you know what you were saying about some shut down, I think that's one of the most common ones, is coping mechanisms wise. You know, when people, whatever it is they're going through, maybe their dad or mom died, or they've gone through a divorce, or they're, you know, nervous about getting laid off at work, whatever they're going through, if they shut down, if they don't talk about it, if they don't share it with their wife, what it does is you can't turn off selectively. If you turn it off, you turn everything off, right? So when you try to hold that in, because men are afraid, we're scared to death what's going to come out, what might come out if we start talking, right? Like you said, you got in your car and just broke down, just let it all out. Well, that's healthy.
Right.
That was a good thing that you did that, right? And a lot of men don't do that because they're scared to let that out, because they're like, oh man, if I start letting a little bit out, it might all come pouring out. I don't want that to happen, so I'm just going to keep the lid
and it gets easier.
Tight. But what happens is when you do that, when you keep the lid tight to not let out those bad things, you stop being able to communicate about the good things too, right? You're going to start drifting apart from your wife on holidays and good events, right? If you shut down the pain, you're also going to shut down the joy with it, right? And that ability to let out the pain, talk about it, share it, that's going to be emotional. It's going to require vulnerability, but it's also going to make you closer together, and it's going to make you able to share good times.
Yeah. I would find that it's natural when you're in the Marines, or in the military, you only want to hang out with those people because you feel like they're the only people that understand, or you can relate to. When you're a cop, you just naturally hang out with other cops because nobody else will understand what I'm talking about, And when I started coming to Men's Alliance, I was fresh out of law enforcement, and people would share their problems, what they're going through, and I would just constantly, like, in my head, be like rolling my eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Being like, tell me when you got real problems. It's like, I'm pressure with work. I got a project. and I'm just really. It's like, give me a break. And I felt like I couldn't relate. But the more you go, you like you said, you got to take that humble pill and realize, like, these problems are just as serious to them as yours are to you. And the more you hang out and be around other people that aren't necessarily in your field of work, I think it's healthy because you can see, you're not constantly surrounded by everybody who's actually going through exactly what you're going through that nobody has the answers to.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to get out and be like, I can apply what he went through, to what I'm going through. And they want to hear your stories, just as much as, and they need to hear them just as much as you need to hear theirs.
Yeah.
So, it turns out Men's Alliance is a huge answer to a lot of our problems.
Yeah.
It's like, we're not just pretending like it's the correct answer to give when people, like when Goose says, how did you go with it? Here's the layup, Men's Alliance help.
Yeah.
But it's because it's true. I mean, it literally is the answer to so many. God has just blessed this organization and given a place for men to be real and the solution to a lot of our problems that we haven't been able to find before. So, but
yeah, I don't get paid to say that.
Right.
Well, you can hook that up later.
We are going to give you Tribe coffee.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do compliment Men's Alliance in exchange for coffee.
Yeah.
But no, I mean it so much. So, that the other issue I was running into is my identity was built into my job. And that's probably a man problem in general. That's not just a law enforcement thing. Yeah. But I was like, dude, if I get out of law enforcement, I am nobody.
This is who I am.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, and believe it or not, my dad always said, like, government employees don't get fired. Well, I don't know maybe what happened before I was a cop, but like, yeah, you can get fired as a law enforcement officer. So it was always stressful. I was like, dude, what if I get fired? Like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't know. And I also
city employees get fired.
Yeah, they do. I know, but it's not. Yeah, certain people they say they don't.
Government, government is a little bit harder.
Yeah, so it was like, all right, it was challenging to me, because I was like, dude, it stressed me out all the time. And I remember one thing that held me back from becoming a Christian was I was like, dude, I'm so scared that I'd be called into ministry one day. Like, I don't want to leave law enforcement, and I know how God works, and I don't want that to happen. And like, as I progressed in my faith, I found that my identity was leaving being a cop and becoming more being a Christian. What can you take away from me? You can take away, working at Dominion or working in construction or office job or law enforcement. You could take that all away. You could take everything away. You could take my wife away. You could take my kids away. You could put me in jail. You can kill me. But what can you not take away? My faith in Jesus Christ and my eternal life. And you can't take that away from me. So like, that's where I started to get my confidence of, hey, like, I need to be leaning into this more. And at the same time, I don't want to leave the story about my wife hanging. So we were starting to work through these things. It had been, I guess the birthday dinner was in February, or was it
January?
Okay. So my kid was born in February. So I guess it had been literal months before we had done like a date or something, because this is now my kid's like 9 or 11 months old or something. But, money was a little tight, and we're like, hey, let's, I was like, I want to go to the birthday dinner. I was new to Men's Alliance just a couple months in, but they, do the tribe announcements and like birthday dinner tonight. And I think that y'all even hooked it up. You were like, hey, if the reason you're thinking about not coming is because of money, like, just talk to your tribe leader. We'll make it happen.
Yep.
And I was like, okay. I was like, well, And my father-in-law taught me, he's like, if someone offers you something, you need to take it. Don't push back. And I was like, all right, well, we talked to my wife. So I was like, hey, Emily, you want to come to the birthday dinner tonight at Men's Alliance? And she's like, yeah, sure. I was like, okay. So go to the birthday dinner, and like, you know, we're sitting around, and it's, if you're not from the Men's Alliance environment, like you're seeing a lot of Men's Alliance things at once. And so like, you know, you're hearing the creed, you're hearing people call each other by their call signs instead of their names. And like all these dudes are walking around, so many trucks in the parking lot. Like it was raining, people were all fired up, you know, it was awesome.
Fired up.
Yeah.
Because it was raining.
So it was, you know, my wife, like, she even got up at one point and like walked out, and I was like, oh man, I'm probably in trouble. I was like, all right. She comes back and sits back down.
Too much testosterone.
Yeah. Yeah. And she like, at one point's like, man, this is pretty cool. I wonder if there's like a women's alliance. And who was sitting right behind her but Crunchy from Women's Alliance. And like, so we did the creed at the end, and I still wasn't sure what she was thinking. And like, I'm like, well, if she's thinking anything weird, like this is about to
This
push
is
her out
gonna
for sure.
seal it.
Like,
Yeah.
So we do the creed, and we're like, all right. So I get in the truck, and I'm waiting to hear like her being like, you know, you Christians are so stupid. Like this is so weird. And she's like, dude, you've talked about this, and you did the start the fire, but like I had no clue what this was. And she's like, and that was awesome.
Wow.
She's like, that was so cool. We were sitting at a table with Skull and his wife, who's now in Women's Alliance Sapphire and Box Office, and I don't know if Next was there, but Spuds, and a whole bunch of guys there. And like, she got to meet some of these guys' wives, and then like at the end, like we went home, and she's like, yeah, I had to walk out because like I just really needed to think about like, you know, where my faith was at. And I was like, okay, cool, that's good to hear. So we walk out of there, and like, you know, she's kind of cool with it. She's like, you know, I'd be interested in maybe seeing about this Women's Alliance thing. So if you're not familiar with Women's Alliance, it's like a completely separate organization. Correct me if I say anything wrong, but completely separate, but
We
identical.
just recorded a podcast with Crunchy.
Nice. All
So
right,
yeah,
awesome.
people are going to hear all about it.
Awesome. Okay, good. 'Cause it's doing awesome things also. And so like Emily starts going to Lalu, I think it is, at Chapel. And I was going to Foundation Tribe at Chapel also. So Foundation Tribe meets at 6 a.m. on Fridays. Most of you guys go to the comfort of an evening tribe. Let me tell you, you got to be serious about it if you want to get up at 5 in the middle of the winter.
You ain't kidding, man. Foundation Tribe is legit.
Yeah.
That's where it's at.
People who come out there mean it. So, like, my wife started going to this tribe, and she's like, you know, first night, like, somebody met me by the car and just talked to me and said, hey, thanks for sharing. Like, you know, she's like, I didn't feel like I'd get in trouble if I cussed there. And like, you know, I was still angry at God. Still didn't, I don't know if she would say she's an atheist at that point, but she was still angry. And like, this was the first environment that I think met her where she was at, with like, hey, you can be real and like express your emotions here. And we're
Man,
not
that
going
is
to tell you.
so good to hear. That's like the best thing to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something Men's Alliance does also.
Yeah.
Like, that's a great thing about it. You don't have to clean up your act to come
You
here.
don't have to pretend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, and so like she went back a couple times, and then I remember she got a call sign Cinema. It was a competition thing with Box Office, and she knows way more movie quotes than Box Office. No, I'm joking. No. But yeah, so like she gets Cinema, and she's like, I think she led a devotion pretty early on, and like and that's where I think her heart really started to change. You know, God really used that to speak into her life. And then I wish I could say it was just smooth sailing. It wasn't. It's still a process. That was this year, 2024. So, you know, it's still a process. But she has grown so much in a short period of time. She's put me to shame many times with sharing her faith and like stepping up. She was involved in launching the first tribe at Journey, Vanadium, and like she's the workout chiefess there, so she gets to get all fired up, and it's so encouraging to see. And then to see the community just come together, it started getting her. She's like, well, I want to start coming to church. And so she started coming to church and starts stepping up. And then like, well, there's a women's conference at church, and like, and you know, a lot of the Women's Alliance folks are talking about going, so like maybe I'll go. And next thing you know, she's like, you know, now she's worshiping. It's just like, it's so awesome to see the growth and how God's working in her life. So encouraging. And like, man, it is like made our family so awesome. Like to be able to embrace the scripture and God's word on how we should walk out being a family, and like, what servant leadership looks like, what embracing these values looks like, being able to walk through it, do, devotions together, and, be able to lead the family through worship. That's just awesome stuff that I'm trying to grow in. And I'm so grateful that I've got a wife who is, willing to submit in love to that, and just puts me to shame in so many ways of her faith that, I wish I could compete with. So that's been so encouraging now. Our son said a little while ago is coming up on 2 years old. And, I hope that I can maintain the fire that I've got right now for this. I hope that God keeps using me. I'm absolutely open into being in ministry now, still in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. I don't foresee any immediate change in that, but like, I'm open to where God wants me. And like, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to.
Let me just tell you, you are already in ministry.
Yeah.
You absolutely are. Holy smokes. You are just as in ministry as some missionary in the jungle. Mm-hmm. You're in a very important mission field. Mm-hmm. God needs more men like you in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Big time.
I appreciate it. I hope I can live up to that standard. I don't, like, a lot.
Well, none of us do,
I just want to set an example, and that's like the most convicting. I mean, I'm sure everybody who works in a secular work environment struggles with this. Mm-hmm. Is like, hey, you want to, like, I love your statement. I've used it a couple times this week. Like, if you were on trial for being a Christian, is there enough evidence to convict you? I've said that, and like, always get a great response when I say that. It's convicting for myself. Like, okay, so you put the evidence out there, but now you have to live it. Mm-hmm. Like, I got angry at a coworker a couple months ago, and like, just absolutely berated him, and like, just, it was so disappointing, my behavior, and like, walked out of it. And the first thing this coworker said was like, "Wow, that's not very Christian of you." I'm like, I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's not. So I walked out of there,
punched him in the face.
Yeah. Yeah. Next thing you know, it was a whole fight, guns and everything. But it was like, man, need to repent of that, and like, let me try to use this now to show, like, I'm a sinner and I'm gonna fail. That's why everybody can be a Christian. You just need to follow God. Like, you don't have to clean up your act, and like, I'm sorry for doing that, but it really brings up the standard. Like, am I sharing the gospel today? Like, I was just given this opportunity, set it up, and just completely failed it. Or, that's where Patch Class, I recently went through Patch Class. That's been awesome. Like, you can read the books. I mean, there are some awesome books. You just gave me, I told you I hate reading. And now I just yesterday got those 3 books in you were supposed to read. So that was, I'm like, great. They're not, some of them are thick books for me. So I'm like, all right, better get on them. But like, you cannot, from a book, get the practical application of having a conversation and challenging, like, hey, can you defend your faith when, like, it's an actual conversation and not prescripted? And that's something you just can't get away with in Patch. Like, you have to learn that. And, obviously the rugged side of it is awesome. Like, I've always loved fire, but like, I never knew that I'd have this love for fire that I do now. So if you have not gone through Patch, like, I try to encourage people to do that so much, because it's such a great skill to learn the apologetics. I did a devotion last night at my church. It was like, what kind of ambassador are you? You're an ambassador, but what kind of ambassador are you? Because we sit here, when you're in the Air Force, I'm confident you could explain the intricacies of this plane to the point where I would be so bored of hearing the details of how this plane operates. And when you're working, you can explain the intricacies of your job. And I can tell you all sorts of stuff about why I think a law enforcement officer should or shouldn't have used force like he did, or, whatever. But can the average Christian explain where the scripture came from, explain how to defend their faith? If they push back at all, well, I think, macro evolution. Okay, well, like, how do we defend stuff like that? And it's embarrassing, how a lot of cultural Christianity, America, myself included, was like, couldn't do that. And man, like, what would Christ say about that? Like, he would want us to really step up and dive in. We live in a world where we are blessed to have literal 5 different translations on my phone that I can compare, countless YouTube videos I can dig into and exegete scripture with. And like, but we don't. And we're like, oh, we'll go to church on Sunday, maybe a small group. Like even Men's Alliance, like, okay, but those are launching points for you to learn more. Men's Alliance, awesome. But like Men's Alliance at just around the fire isn't going to get you deep into apologetics necessarily. So it's like you got to put in effort. You know? You spend time on your phone, you spend time hanging out with friends. Are you able to prioritize 15 minutes a day to read scripture? It's not that big of a deal once you get it in your schedule. But like, and then if you're there, well, what's the next step? Like it's never ending, How can you be a better Christian, a better follower of Christ?
It's the easiest thing, I think, Christianity and the faith, for people to give a justification of like a copping out excuse of why they're not defending something. Yeah. Like if you question me on my faith and I don't have an answer for it, it's like, you just don't get it. You don't believe it.
You don't have enough faith.
You just have to have faith.
Yeah, you just got to have faith.
Yeah.
I don't really know the answers either. I just believe it, and that's all God requires of me is just to believe it.
Yeah, bad ambassadors is what makes...
You can't do that with anything else.
Right.
You can't do that if your boss asks you, why did you make that decision? I just believed. You don't get why I made that decision. Yeah. I just believe it, I just believed that it was the right decision.
So if you're listening to this and you're wanting to get into this Carry the Fire class that Breacher's been talking about, you can sign up right now on our website. We're bringing Carry the Fire to Pennsylvania in 2025. So it's going to be our first Pennsylvania FTX, and registration is open for that right now. Our next class in Virginia is already full in the spring, already booked. So you can sign up for June in Pennsylvania right now.
Sweet. Yeah, it's been awesome. I love when I get to see somebody's like day one experience of Men's Alliance, and I was able to see that with you with Start the Fire, and just to see their like progression, through it. Like to me, you're totally like not a totally different person, but a different person.
Yeah.
Because when we first met, you had long hair, pretty quiet. You weren't like you were admittedly so like, I don't know anything. Yeah. I'm just here because I think I need it. Yeah. And to hear you talk now, it's just like, it's awesome.
When did you go all in on Christianity? When did you give your life to Christ?
How
long ago?
So, like, I don't want to I believe that my profession of faith when I was a teenager was authentic, but like when I went all in, we got married in 2019. It was right about that. It was kind of building up. I was like, I'm not going to go to church a hypocrite, sleeping with my girlfriend at the time and her fiance, and like, and put on this fake act. So I'm just not going to go. I'm just going to live in my sin and embrace it. But like the moment that we were married, I'm like, all right, sin is behind me now. And I know that's a cop out. That's not the answer. The answer is stop sinning.
Yeah.
But like, all right, now I'm in. And then like, it's just continued to grow. And like, it's been a fire, but like the Men's Alliance effect has been so helpful for me to be bold in sharing my faith. The practical conversations is just the biggest thing. Like you can't get that anywhere else. Like unless you're actually out there having conversations.
Yeah. Nobody else is doing this training.
Yeah.
And I was the same as you. I made a profession of faith as a kid, as probably like 12 or something. But I didn't go all in. Really, making Christ Lord of my life all in. It was January 1st, 2015. And then 2 years later, to the week, starting Men's Alliance.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's why I say, when do you go all in?
Yeah,
because I think that's when the difference gets made.
Yeah, 100%.
That's when things change. A lot of people make some profession or maybe acknowledge it intellectually, but their life doesn't change. And there's no fruit, there's no evidence. And I would say they're not born again.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of it is just dying to your sin. Like, and sometimes that happens at a young age, and God uses you from that point, Sometimes, it happens through God putting things in your life where you're like, you will die to this sin, and it's about to happen, and you're going to hit a spot where you need to die to it. And sometimes it doesn't happen. Like you just live a sinful life your entire life. And, the transformation in my life, just even recently, has just radically just gone. I mean radically changed. Like it's just like the love in my heart when I remember you're listening to radio traffic in your vehicle, like police radio traffic in your vehicle all the time when you're driving. Like, so it's just kind of going on in the background. You get this skill where you're able to like kind of listen to like anything that's high priority. And I remember recently I heard an accident come out, and my first inclination was like, man, that's it. You always want to listen to it. You're like, oh man, what are the details of that? Like, sounds pretty crazy, but it wasn't like a care for the person involved in the accident. And then like I was convicted in that moment, like, dude, what are you doing? Like, there's somebody whose life is on the line right now, and you're like treating it like it's almost an entertainment thing, listening to the radio when somebody's fighting for their life. It's like, all right, so I'm like, let me stop and pray and like just be intentional about praying for this person, wherever they're at and what's going on. It turns out it was somebody at my church. It was like, dang. And they came, they did a testimony recently, and like their parents did, and she was like, the prayer that just people immediately poured out was obviously like he was supposed to die, he ended up living, and I was like,
wow.
I didn't know her that well, but I was like, hey, I just want you to know, like in the moment, I didn't think anything of it, and then I was just convicted that I was like, man, I need to pray for this person, and it's been awesome. So
For some people, you got to remember as a cop, like their interaction with you, or their interaction with the police, it could be their first time, and it's probably the worst day of their life.
Yep.
So like every call, you have to go in with that mindset. Like this is probably the worst day of their life, so let me try to make it better for them.
Yeah,
that's so incredible to hear as a civilian, to hear that there are cops out there like you. There are cops that are praying when they hear a radio call.
Yeah.
And I think more cops need to hear you, because I know just like every job, military, law enforcement, like you said earlier about the Marines, there's so many people that are Christians in it, but they're not living that way. They're kind of keeping it in the closet. And, I share this story about seeing a pilot one time. I was walking into the briefing room before a flight, and I saw a pilot with a little patch on the side of his flight suit. It said Joshua 1:9. And I felt so convicted when I saw that, because I was like, that should be me.
Yeah. Is there enough evidence right now that I've been convicted?
Right. I should be that guy, and I'm a million miles away from being that guy. Right. But those little things that a Christian does at work, they give encouragement and power to those who are kind of on the sideline. Right.
And it's about putting that rock in somebody's shoe, like Greg Kokel says. It's not necessarily like, hey, let me pray for you right now. I mean, sometimes it is, but it's a long game. And,
that's right.
I hope that the people who listen to this, if I have anybody from work who listens to this, that they're not like, man, that guy's a hypocrite. I mean, I hope. I know I fail. But
we are all hypocrites.
Yeah.
A hypocrite is somebody who doesn't live up to their own standard.
Yeah.
And that's all of us.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you. Now that premarital sex isn't your struggle, what's your struggle now?
Pride is something I'm always trying to push down. That's an easy one for men to say, but like that's one that can quickly sneak up. I'm like, okay, for the longest time it was pride in law enforcement. Like, what am I doing? What unit am I assigned to? I'm a SWAT. I want to be like the top guy.
Right.
And now it's like, man, what about pride about in ministry, or like with my faith? I want to brag about these things. And it's like, dude, I
want to be the most humble.
Yeah, exactly. Like
that's what I am.
And that's my biggest struggle. And still, like, my temper is an easy one to lose. Like, I get frustrated. I like to see things very like, hey, by the book, this is the way the house needs to be. Let's keep things organized, and it's easy for me to start to get frustrated. And I mean, it's not, I think I've worked it where it's not necessarily a lashing out all the time, but it's like, hey, like even last night, my wife, I'm supposed to go to the young adults ministry at church. My wife's supposed to go to Women's Alliance at the church. She calls me on my way home and she's like, I just got this massive splinter in my foot. And I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do about that? And she's like, well, care. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm currently driving and I'm coming as fast as I can. I'm not using any emergency equipment on my vehicle to get there. So, did you want to keep talking about it, or did you want to try to solve the problem? And I didn't say those exact words, but like I was definitely not like. And I'm like, I get home
She
and
was responsive to that, right?
That was
it
the
was
most
like,
you know,
good point,
manly
babe. Sorry.
response ever.
She said, "Good point. I'm sorry I called."
yeah.
And hung up. And
She's like,
cut
I'll
her foot
fix
off.
myself.
Yeah.
So I get home and I'm like, wow, that actually is a pretty solid splinter in your foot, and that is going to require team effort here. And she's like, yeah, you could have been a little bit more loving on the phone. I'm like, you're right. I'm sorry. I should have, obviously seeing that's legitimate. You're not exaggerating. And I just need to be more loving and like willing to let things get in the way sometimes. That's another thing.
How did she get a splinter in her foot?
Look, we don't need to talk about that because it's the floor, and she's been trying to get me to do new hardwood flooring.
Okay.
Those are bad.
Yeah,
splinters.
and it was not a staged splinter. Like, I mean, this thing was solid.
Ouch.
I had to like basically cut her foot open to get it out.
This is a great opportunity to remind people something I say a lot, but you responded to her with all the qualities that make you good at your job. Right? And the qualities that make all men good at our jobs are the exact same qualities that will make us bad at home. Right? And so we've got to be able to be exactly like you described while we're at work. And then when we come home or we talk to our wife on the phone, we've got to take off work hat, put on husband, father hat.
Yeah.
And if you're wondering what that looks like, what is that husband, father hat? It's in Colossians chapter 3, right? So I'll challenge you, if you're listening to this and you want to know how you're supposed to act when you come home, go read Colossians 3. It describes it like articles of clothing, the things that you're supposed to put on. But for like, it's not that the way you responded is bad things. It's that they're being used in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what's going to make you a great cop, is that boom, 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 boom response.
Yeah.
And then men make the mistake all the time of we bring that home.
Yeah. Her response is like, you could have just said like, I'm sorry that happened to you. And I was like, yep, you're right. And I knew when I picked up the phone and heard your tone of voice, I was like, hey, this is a good time to go ahead and be loving. And I was like, I'm going to check that right now and not do that.
Yeah.
So like, fortunately,
Can't do it.
She's a forgiving person. So we've moved past it. But,
That's awesome.
and I have one more thing that I want
Yeah.
to say now, which is like submission to authority. Like in law enforcement and military, you are the authority. But guess what? Everybody has authority. And like, even if you're the world's top dog, you still submit to God. Like, so I've always struggled with submitting to authority from literally being a young child and not wanting to listen to my parents and trying to be the dude who's in charge of all the other kids. And like, even in my tribe, like, man, hey, I need to submit to the tribe leader here. And it's funny, box office has straight called me out before when I say too much. He's like, hey, I'm in charge here. I'm like,
Yeah, I can hear him say
yeah,
that. That's
yeah.
perfect.
I mean, he, and I needed that. Like, I needed that check. But like at work is a big one. It's like, man, I'm called. Me and my wife were just reading Ephesians 6, and it's like, submission, slaves submit to your bondservants, submit to your masters. And like, I haven't done a deep dive on that specific use of the word slave, but I assume it's referring more to like the worker boss analogy. And like, hey, it doesn't matter. And I'm not saying my boss is a horrible guy at all. And don't get that if you're listening to this. but it doesn't matter how they're treating you. Like, you need to submit to that.
Right.
And I struggle with just the pride of like, hey, no, I want to be in charge. I want to be the guy who's, making decisions. And like, no, like that's not the case. You need to be respectful and honoring of your earthly leader. And like, that's a big one that I've struggled with. And I'm sure that'll be a struggle for the rest of my life.
No, that's so good. And that's like such a problematic passage for people, right? It's not condoning slavery either, by the way. It's saying like, if you should happen to find yourself in a position like this, you still do what's right,
Right.
no matter what. You just take care of yourself. You do what's right. do everything heartily as unto the Lord and not for men.
Right.
And man, that's hard for us.
Yeah.
That's a tall order for sure.
Yeah. There are so many men, especially in law enforcement, like they're just dudes like who want to be the dude. Like they want to be the one going through the door.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be the guy who's getting the glory for.
Man, I want to be a cop right now.
Man, I'm glad I'm selling this right now. So like, you want to be that guy, but that's not how it works.
Right.
You got to submit to earthly leaders, and sometimes that's you just listening to the input they have for a case. Sometimes that's like, hey, I completely disagree, but they're in charge of me, and I need to submit to that. And it could be church also. Like put me in any environment where somebody's in charge, and I'm probably going to find a way to be like, I do that better.
I could have done
and
that. Yeah.
And that's
So my wife and daughter, who's 18, they went on a trip. And, my wife is like, did you pack this? Did you pack this? Did you pack it? And my daughter's getting really annoyed with this because she feels like she's being treated like a little child. And she's like, yes, I know how to pack. I've done everything. And I had to tell her, I was like, listen, pilots who have 20,000 flight hours, they still get asked before every single landing to confirm out loud that they have their gear down. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how old you are, how experienced you are, you can still make mistakes.
Yep.
And you have to be humble enough for people to say, hey, make sure you're doing this right?
Yeah.
You didn't forget this simple thing. And pilots you don't get offended. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're asking me that. I've been flying. No, you just, yep, I'm human. I might make a mistake. Confirm gear down. And I think we got to all carry that level of humility with us. You got to learn how to lead, but you've got to also learn how to be led.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You can't be a good leader until you're first a good follower.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That line of the creed hits hard all the time. I expect to lead and be led. And like
by box office.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I just say that part real fast.
Yeah.
I expect to lead that.
Yeah. And I'm always about trying to find that opportunity to lead. But got to find those opportunities to submit also and do that. And that is another way to share the gospel is like, hey, because people notice it. Like, when other people are complaining, when your coworkers are complaining, are you speaking in a way that builds up, or are you just tearing this person down and talking bad? And I joked like, man, it's easy for me to find a problem with every single boss I've ever had. I'm like, so if it's a problem where I can find a problem with everybody, maybe it's a me problem and not a them problem.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Hey, speaking of submission, you mentioned Romans 13.
Yeah.
Tell people what that says.
Yeah. So
just in your own words. Just put it into your words.
Okay, good, because I don't have it memorized.
Just put it in your words.
It's submit to the governing authorities. I think that's where they go. No, that's not it. No. So submit to the governing authorities. That the government that carries the sword for a reason. For those who fear the sword, the evildoer should fear the sword. And I don't know if I'm missing anything, but those are the big takeaways from that one that I thought is like, we don't carry the sword in vain. We have a reason for it. Obviously, today the sword is judicial punishment and a firearm.
Yeah.
And we have that for a reason because evil people seek to prey on people. And that there's times where that violence is needed to stop something. But only the evil people fear the sword. You hear of this like mindset now, that people are just so scared of the cops. And there are legitimate reasons sometimes to be fearful, and you're poorly educated on how law enforcement operates or something, or you've been through a traumatic experience where law enforcement handled it poorly. We're fallen too.
Sure.
We're going to make mistakes.
They're human.
But overall, I think a lot of it is like, if you're so fearful, like, is there a possibility that you're doing something that you're not supposed to? And Scripture speaks to that. So.
I also take from Romans 13 is that we're supposed to submit to the government's authority because God put it there, right? Even authority that we don't agree with, we're supposed to submit to it. And that's like one of the hardest passages, right? Is like, it's pretty clear. You're supposed to submit to authority, even authority that you don't agree with, because God put them there, and that's how God moves and judges people. So, I think, you are that sword, but you're also at times you have to submit to that
100%
too. Right. And that's hard for men. I asked one of my buddies, who's been, an operator in a lot of places about that. I was like, how do you reconcile being a Christian and submitting to these authorities? And he goes, yeah, that's probably one area where I'm just not a very good Christian. Right. And I thought that was the most honest answer I've ever heard to that. Right. Because usually people try to like rationalize it. Oh, well, but I was like, no, it's right there. It's clear. We're supposed to submit to authority.
Right.
And it's a hard line to walk when you start, you just open a whole can of worms.
I know. We just got a whole new podcast going.
It's a hard line to walk of like, hey, I want to honor authority in my life. Well, it's specifically governmental authority, but like, where do I draw the line that like, this is now attacking my family's morals and coming after my family's values, and I'm not going to obey. And
it's very tough.
Yeah.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't take up arms against Nebuchadnezzar. They just said, hey, if you throw us in the fire, that's on you.
Yeah.
I struggle with that. Daniel just got thrown in the lion's den. He didn't, take up arms against the government. And I think this is hard for specifically American Christians. We have as an American Christian, and I'm a super Second Amendment guy, I struggle with this one. I'm like, oof, I know what the Bible says, but I know what I want to do.
Yeah.
So you just say he's still working on me.
Yeah. I'm just not there yet.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's still working. He ain't through with me yet.
Yeah, he ain't through with me yet. Yeah. I mean, you should definitely do a podcast on that. That's a solid one. That men struggle with so much, especially in the Christian environment. But,
That's our next one.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, since you are prior military and current law enforcement, the people want to know, what's your EDC?
Okay.
What do you carry?
Yeah. So,
dude, this has been awesome.
Yeah. Thanks so much. When you sent me the email, inviting me on here, I was like, what? I was like, he wants me on the podcast? Like, I haven't done anything. I'm nobody. So I really appreciate you having me on. It's pretty cool.
Heck yeah, man.
You are somebody.
Awesome. You are absolutely somebody. And appreciate, your leadership in MA. And, like I said, you are a missionary on the mission field right now. So we'll be praying for you.
Awesome. I appreciate it. I always love the prayers.
Awesome, man.
All right. Semper Fi, devil.
Semper Fi, rah.
All right.
See, wasn't this fun?
Yeah. It's great.
To find out more about what we're doing and to join us on our mission, go to men'salliancetribe.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a 5-star review.